For 24 months my dad sent $600 from the desert, but my husband gambled it away, so I froze the accounts and took him to court. For 2 years I thought our struggles were because life was hard. Low paychecks, high bills, birthdays we celebrated with dollar store decorations. But the truth was far darker. Every missing field trip, every skipped meal, every late-night delivery shift wasn't fate. It was theft. And the thief was sleeping in my bed. I froze, putting up the phone to show him Maren playing with her pals. "What? $600, Dad?" My husband's eyes bulged, and his coffee mug almost fell from his grasp. My father's expression quickly became anxious. "The birthday money, sweetheart. I send it every month like always." I giggled nervously and bewildered. "Dad? I think you're confused. You haven't sent anything. I would have thanked you." Dad's expression darkened on the screen. "Mixed up? Alara, I've been sending $600 every single month for 2 years, for the kids, for birthdays, for clothes, and everything you need." He vanished from the frame, reappearing with a big folder. 24 transfers per year, October, November, and December. He displayed printout after printout to the camera. $600 per month, routing number ends in 4782. My heart stopped. Silas had a separate account for his work expenses. "For my grandkids," Dad said, his voice breaking. "So you wouldn't have to struggle while I'm stationed here, so they could have birthday parties and Christmas presents, and you could go grocery shopping without stress." Each statement struck me like a physical blow. I remembered Maren's dollar store birthday decorations and her regretful face when I said we'd do something special next year. The nights I skipped dinner so the kids could eat enough. We had 2 ramen experiences per week. They missed the field trips. "I'm sleeping in a barracks in Kuwait," Dad said gently, "sending half my contractor pay so you don't struggle." I looked at Silas. He stood there, face pale, hands trembling. Coffee spilled at his feet, like a confession. 24 months, I said quietly, my mind calculating despite the shock. $600 each month. The room began to spin. $12,000. While I sold my grandmother's ring to pay for Maren's school supplies, while I drove for DoorDash after bedtime to cover groceries, while I told the kids that homemade birthdays are more special, while Silas came home late from overtime, with dilated pupils and new excuses. "You've been stealing my father's money while our kids went without." The quiet was oppressive, save for Maren's laughing from the backyard. "I was going to tell you," Silas began. "Tell me what?" I exclaimed. "That you've been collecting $600 a month while I worked 3 jobs, while I told Maren we couldn't afford a birthday cake from the store. Then where is it?" I took his phone. "Show me where the $12,000 went." He opened it with trembling hands. I viewed the account. Deposits from Kuwait and then withdrawals. ATM in the casino costs $200. ATM in the casino costs $300. "I have a problem," he murmured. "You had $600 coming in every month from my father while I skipped meals," I remarked quietly. "You held me while I sobbed about failing our kids. You said we needed to budget better while you were stealing." Dad's voice was icy and steady. "Silas, did my granddaughter eat ramen for dinner on her birthday while you had my money in your pocket?" Silas could not look at the television. "I'm 7,000 miles away, in the desert," Dad said, his voice breaking. "You made my daughter believe I had forgotten them." I grabbed Silas's phone again and scrolled through the transactions. "These casino withdrawals," I explained, my voice quivering. "July 15th, that was Maren's first soccer game. August 3rd, her first dance recital. You weren't stuck in traffic. You weren't at work. You were gambling while I sat alone at our child's biggest moments, making excuses for why Daddy couldn't make it." He glanced at the floor, embarrassed. Then the Christmas memory struck me like a sledgehammer. "Last year, I informed the kids that Santa was having a terrible year." Maren cried. She felt like she had done something wrong. My voice cracked. She came home after seeing all the other kids' presents and asked what she did wrong. She made a list of ways to be better so Santa would love her next time. My emotions were boiling over. "You had $600 in December, another $600 in November, $1,000, while I wrapped dollar store toys in newspaper, while our perfect daughter spent a year trying to be better because you made her believe she wasn't good enough for Christmas." Maren dashed inside, her handmade paper crown sliding. "Mommy, can we have cake now?" I said, gazing at her adorable face and the homemade cake I decorated at 2 a.m., following my DoorDash shift. Yes, baby. Go get your friends. When she went, I turned around. $600 a month for 2 years while your daughter wore shoes with holes, while your son couldn't play soccer. While I skipped lunch every day to save $5. Dad's voice pierced through like a dagger. I'm on the next flight home. Emergency family leave. 24 months of wire fraud, Silas. Silas's face became gray. Corin, please pack the kids' things tonight, Dad added, his tone kinder now. You're done struggling alone. I'll be there in 18 hours. I stared at Marin's birthday crown on the counter, which was composed of paper plates and aluminum foil. She had no idea her grandfather had given money for a real one. You didn't just steal money, I explained calmly. You stole their relationship with him. Marin thinks her grandpa doesn't care. You stole that from her. Dad was putting on his uniform jacket behind him. Mom was using another phone. I overheard forensic accountant. 18 hours, Dad said. And Silas, you better not be there when I arrive. He hung up the phone, and when I turned to face Silas, he had a look on his face that indicated he was willing to do anything than go peacefully. My fingers grasped the counter edge so tightly that my knuckles turned white as Silas took a stride towards me, his jaw gritted and fists stiff at his sides. The birthday guests were still laughing in the backyard, and my husband stood there, looking like he was about to hurt me for the first time in our marriage. I slid my phone under the counter and typed a brief message to Dad without looking down. Just 3 words spoke it all. Marin ran through the rear door, asking for juice boxes, and I faked a smile that felt like breaking glass. Silas went back into the corner as I took the beverages from the fridge and presented them to her, shaking hands. She bounced back outdoors, oblivious that her entire world was about to change forever. My thumb discovered my neighbor's phone number, so I texted her to see if she was home, just in case I needed to get the kids out quickly. She quickly responded that her door was open if we needed anything, and I felt a little less alone. Silas looked at me with those calculating eyes that said he knew precisely what I was doing. Parents began arriving to pick up their children, and I accompanied each one to the door with fake cheerfulness while Silas remained in the kitchen. The last mother had finally taken her son, and I locked the door behind them with deliberate slowness, knowing what was coming next. Silas instantly began ranting about how I didn't understand and how he was going to repay it, but I held out my hand to stop him. I took out my phone and pressed the record button, placing it on the counter between us, where the red light flashed as a warning. He began pacing the kitchen, alternately blaming his work stress and pledging to get assistance tomorrow if I gave him another chance. I let him talk while the phone captured every excuse and justification he gave. When he finally acknowledged to stealing the money but claimed it was only borrowed, I felt my stomach turn but kept my face totally neutral. When the kids walked in and asked about dinner, I told them we were having a special sleepover in Mom's room tonight, which sounded like an adventure. They were delighted about camping in my bedroom, so I helped them assemble their stuffed animals and blankets while Silas observed from the doorway. After they were finished watching a movie on my laptop, I locked my bedroom door and heard Silas's footsteps in the corridor. He knocked once, hard enough to rattle the frame, but stopped when I told him that the children were listening and did not need to hear this. I contacted the non-emergency police line from the bathroom, using the running water to conceal my voice. The operator listened as I described the event and provided me a report number, stating that an officer might conduct a drive-by if I felt unsafe. Her soothing voice helped to soothe my nerves, even though my hands shook as I scribbled down the case number. My phone rang with a text from Dad, displaying his flight information, and stating that he'd arrive at 2 p.m. Tomorrow a rental automobile has already been reserved. Mom messaged separately, saying she'd found a forensic accountant who specializes in financial abuse cases and could begin documenting everything right away. Knowing that they were both mobilizing in different directions, let me feel less trapped in this nightmare. I hardly slept that night, getting up every hour to check the door locks and look at the kids sleeping soundly in my bed. Around 3 a.m., I heard Silas moving around in the garage, so I grabbed my phone to record the time and what I heard. The garage door opened and closed twice. Then his pickup began, and idled for 20 minutes before he returned inside. I typed everything into my phone notes, producing a history of his actions that would be useful later as evidence. By sunrise, I had typed down a complete timeline of the previous 2 years, including every late night, missed event, and reason for overtime. The kids awoke at their usual hour, and I got them ready for school as if nothing had happened, keeping their pattern intact. Marin inquired why we had a sleepover, and I explained that it was simply for fun. While I braided her hair with shaky fingers, I packed their lunches and checked their backpacks as Silas snored on the living room couch. When I walked by to retrieve the kid's shoes, I noticed him splayed down, surrounded by empty beer bottles and cigarette butts. The time of this video call appears weirdly perfect, doesn't it? 2 years of monthly payments, and it just happens to come up at the birthday party, while Silas is sitting there with his coffee. I took photos from 3 different perspectives, making careful to capture the chaos around him while he pretended to want to solve things. The rising sun illuminated the evidence of his priorities perfectly. This dad stole from his own children and drowned his remorse in drink. Marin inquired whether Daddy was unwell, and I assured her he was simply sleepy while I assisted her with her jacket. My son grabbed his backpack without asking any questions, but I noticed him glancing at his father with a puzzled expression. We stepped outside to wait for the school bus, and I gripped their hands tighter than normal, wondering how I'd shield them from everything. The bus arrived, and I watched them mount the steps before driving directly to the bank. My hands shook as I completed the paperwork for my personal bank account. The banker assisted me in switching my job direct deposit, and demonstrated how to transfer exactly half of our joint account balance. I took screenshots of the balance before doing anything, and Silas's half remained undisturbed. Back at home, his car remained in the driveway, and I could hear him snoozing upstairs. I retrieved our vital documents from the filing cabinet in the hallway closet. Birth certificates were placed in a manila folder among social security cards and insurance documentation. His desk drawer was unlocked, and I discovered his separate account statements hidden behind old tax returns. The casino withdrawals dated back 3 years, not 2. Page after page revealed the same pattern, with the amounts increasing over time. I documented each statement with my phone, and then locked everything in my car trunk. My phone began to vibrate with fraud notifications while I was still in the driveway. Silas was using an ATM downtown, emptying our joint bank account. I phoned the bank immediately, but he had already stolen $400. The woman on the phone helped me freeze the account, but the harm had already been done. I took screenshots of each alert and saved them in my expanding evidence folder. At school pickup, I went straight to the main office and stated that there was a family emergency. The secretary noted in their computer system that only I may pick up the children. Marin's teacher stopped me in the hallway and noted that Marin appeared frightened today. Throughout story time, she kept asking if everything was well at home. I assured her we were going through some changes, but the kids were safe. Back in my car, I composed an email to the principal, explaining the custody issue. I requested her to chronicle any attempts by Silas to remove the children from school. Her response arrived within minutes, stating that they would follow protocol and only release them to me. While I was waiting for the kids to come out, another safety net clicked into place. Silas's texts began to arrive quickly while I was preparing dinner. First, he apologized and begged me to discuss. Then he became enraged, stating I was overreacting to certain mistakes. Within an hour, he was threatening to take the kids unless I stopped being dramatic. I screenshotted every conversation, including those in which he used the word take. In 60 minutes, his messages ranged from apologizing to blaming me to issuing threats. I called legal aid and scheduled an appointment with Rose Donnelly for the following morning. She listened to my entire story and promptly began filling out papers for an emergency protective order. She told me the process might take a few days, but I was doing everything correctly. She'd seen this pattern before: theft, gambling, and threats. I spent the rest of the afternoon writing down every detail I could recall, every birthday he missed by claiming overtime while he was actually at the casino, every night I went to bed hungry so the kids could eat while he had money in his pocket, and every field trip they couldn't attend because we couldn't afford the fee. My hand cramped from writing, but putting it all down on paper was like releasing poison from my body. Rose read it and said it was compelling evidence in the custody dispute. Silas realized I had stopped the joint account about dinner time and texted me, accusing me of financial abuse. 20 minutes later, I received notification that he'd gotten a $2,000 cash advance on our credit card. The transaction showed that it took place at the casino ATM, as it always does. I also called to freeze the card, but the funds were already gone. That upped his steal total to $14,000, including my father's money, and now this. Dad called during the children's bath time during his layover in Germany. His voice was fatigued but attentive as he requested updates on everything. When he described Marin's birthday party, his voice cracked slightly. I could hear Mom in the background making lists of what to bring and who to call. They were both in full defense mode, ready to help us reconstruct everything Silas had destroyed. The next morning seemed to drag on forever until, at 2:15 p.m., the doorbell rang, and there was Dad standing on the porch in his dusty contractor clothes with his duffel bag. My legs buckled, and I grasped the doorframe as the children shrieked and dashed past me into his arms. He dropped his bag and grabbed them both, pulling them up and peering over their heads at me with a ferocious expression that indicated no one was going to touch us again. Silas heard the disturbance in the bedroom, and I saw him peek over the corner before slinking back when Dad noticed him. Dad put the kids down and instructed them to go play in the backyard for a while. Then he came directly to the kitchen table and began taking documents from his backpack. He spread bank statements, wire transfer receipts, and printed emails on the table, and Silas eventually came out and sat across from us. Dad's voice remained low and controlled, but there was something menacing beneath as he went through each payment one by one, pointing to dates and amounts. October 15th, $600, while Marin wore shoes with holes. November 3rd, $600, while they ate ramen for dinner. December 1st, $600, while the kids thought Santa forgot them. Silas kept his eyes on the table and mumbled something about addiction being a disease, but Dad cut him off with a look that could have melted steel. After going through all 26 transactions, Dad instructed Silas to pack his luggage and go. But Silas crossed his arms and replied, "This is also my house." Dad took out his phone and called the police, explaining that we needed a civil standby for a domestic crisis. Within 20 minutes, 2 cops arrived and calmly explained to Silas that, while they couldn't force him out permanently tonight, they strongly advised him to pack his belongings and find another place to stay to give everyone time to settle down. Silas grabbed a rubbish bag and began throwing clothes into it, shouting about his rights and how illegal this was. But the officers simply remained there, watching him walk out the door. After they went, I couldn't sit still and certainly couldn't sleep. So I gathered all of the bank statements and began creating a chronology on poster board with 2 columns. On the left I wrote up every challenge we had, every missed opportunity, and every time I had to tell the kids no. On the right, I typed down every casino withdrawal Silas made using Dad's money. Seeing Marin's missing field trip next to a $200 ATM transaction at the casino made me rush to the restroom and vomit. Dad stayed up with me, preparing pot after pot of coffee and letting me work things out without trying to solve anything. Around 3 a.m., my phone rang, and it was the forensic accountant Mom had hired, phoning from the East Coast, where it was already 6 a.m. She had been working through the night and discovered that the trend was far worse than we had suspected, with Silas's withdrawals occurring within hours of Dad's payments most of the time. She'd also discovered 2 more transactions that we'd overlooked, bringing the total to 26 payments and $13,000 stolen. The theft began 2 months before Dad informed us, implying Silas had been lying and stealing for much longer. The following morning, I traveled to the police station with my poster board chronology and 3 folders of evidence to file a report of theft by fraud. Detective Dorian Vera reviewed my statement thoroughly, asking questions regarding dates and amounts. He provided a case number and said he'd contact me about the following steps, but warned me that these situations take time to develop properly. 2 days later, Detective Vera called again to set realistic expectations, stating that while criminal charges were possible, the prosecutor would have to assess if they could prove intent to deceive because Silas and I were married. He suggested that I prioritize protecting myself and the children in family court first, and then use the criminal case as leverage if necessary. It wasn't what I was expecting, but I appreciated him being honest rather than giving me false hope. That afternoon, I called the school and made an appointment for Marin to meet with Genevieve Duval, a counselor who specializes in assisting children who have experienced familial trauma. She had an opening the next day and informed me that she was trained in age-appropriate techniques for assisting youngsters in processing stressful events. I didn't tell Marin why she was going. All I said was she'd be talking to a wonderful lady at school who helps youngsters deal with their emotions. The next morning, I walked Marin to the counselor's office and waited outside while they spoke, my stomach in knots, wondering what my baby girl would say. After 45 minutes, Genevieve emerged with a portrait of herself, created by Marin, complete with a large X over her body, and the word bad underneath. She stated that Marin had absorbed blame for adult problems, believing she was terrible, which is why Santa did not deliver presents, and Daddy was no longer home. The counselor gave me tools to help reassure Marin without overwhelming her with adult details, suggesting simple phrases like, "Mommy and Daddy's problems are never your fault, and you are loved no matter what." Silas's timing with that ATM withdrawal right when fraud alerts went off appears too convenient. Was he watching the account the entire time? The way he went from regretful to angry to threatening in less than an hour makes me wonder if this is a practiced routine he has used before. That night as the kids slept, Silas texted me, offering to go to rehab and family therapy if I withdrew all legal processes and let him come home right away. The deception was so evident that it made me sick, as he used recovery as a bargaining chip rather than accepting responsibility for his actions. I forwarded the text to Rose at Legal Aid, who responded within minutes, stating that this was normal conduct for someone attempting to dodge punishment, and that I should avoid direct communication going ahead. Dad sat at my kitchen table that evening, his laptop open, reading custody laws while I served the kids mac and cheese. He continued shaking his head and moaning about how the system supported abusers, rather than victims. When the kids left to watch cartoons, he turned the TV toward me and showed case after instance in which gambling addicts were still granted visitation rights. He tightened his jaw when reading about monitored visits and progressive reunion schemes. I knew he wanted Silas completely gone, but courts seldom removed parental rights unless there were serious circumstances. We spent 2 hours going over various situations and safety procedures, marking emergency contacts on my phone, and simulating what to do if Silas arrived. Dad installed recording applications on my phone and demonstrated how to tape everything. The following morning, Rose from Legal Aid called to say she had applied for temporary sole custody and exclusive use of the residence. She sent me an email with 20 pages of forms to examine before our hearing next week. Each page asked for information about our money, housing circumstances, and Silas's conduct. The section on domestic issues made me realize how many warning signs I had overlooked over the years. Rose informed me that despite everything Silas had done, he would eventually face some type of visitation. The idea of giving over my children to him made my stomach turn, but she explained judges nearly always maintain some parental contact. She advised keeping a notebook to record everything that happened from now on. 3 nights later, at 10:15 p.m., a banging on the front door awoke the entire house. Silas's voice resonated across the woods, begging to see his children while slurring slightly. Dad sprang up from the couch where he had been resting and stood by the door, while I grabbed my phone to dial 911. The operator remained on the line as Silas continued to pound and rant about his rights as a father. Marin came downstairs, crying, and I carried her back to her room, telling her everything was fine as my pulse raced. The police arrived in 8 minutes, but it felt like hours. 2 officers spoke with Silas outside, while another collected my statement inside. They informed him of Rose's protective order and cautioned him that coming back would result in immediate arrest. Silas battled with them for another 10 minutes before ultimately departing. The officer gave me a case number and instructed me to call immediately if he returned. Dad stayed up the rest of the night, sitting in a chair facing the front entrance. At 7 a.m., a locksmith arrived and changed all of the locks in the house. Dad supervised while I prepared breakfast, attempting to make things normal for the children. After lunch, we set up a video doorbell and motion sensor lights throughout the property. Dad showed me how to check my phone's camera feed and set alerts for any movement near the doors. That afternoon, we sat the kids down for a safety discussion that was easy and non-threatening. Marin asked why Daddy couldn't use his key anymore, and I simply explained that he was staying somewhere else for a time. We followed our safety guidelines, such as not opening the door for anyone and staying where Mommy could see us. Detective Vera contacted 2 days later, requesting permission to subpoena Silas's bank records and obtain surveillance footage from 3 casinos. He stated that they were putting together a fraud case, but that it would take months to work through the system. I signed every paper he sent over within an hour, hoping for some sort of justice, even if it came slowly. He described uncovering proof of Silas's gambling dating back 5 years, long before Dad began sending money. While sorting through our accumulated mail, I came across 3 notices that I did not identify. They were from several payday lending companies and thanked me for my recent applications. My palms shook when I dialed the numbers and realized Silas had borrowed $5,000 using my social security number. Each company said that the loans were taken out online using my information, but from IP addresses I did not recognize. The fury was so great that I had to sit down before passing out. I spent the next 6 hours on hold with credit bureaus and filed reports for everybody who would listen. Experian came first, followed by TransUnion and Equifax, each of which required the entire tale. The woman at Experian stated that she handles 5 identical situations every week and went me through the process of completely freezing my credit. I filed files with the FTC and the local police, adding to my expanding list of Silas's offenses. Each phone call involved detailing how my spouse stole from my father and using my identity to pay his gambling. The operator from the third payday lending company stated that they would require a police report to investigate the fraud. That afternoon I drove to the station and filled out another report, this time including identity theft. The next day, Genevieve from Child Services called with advice on how to keep the kids stable amidst all of the upheaval. She suggested keeping their routines consistent, with regular bedtimes, meals and timetables. It was impossible to act normally while everything was falling apart, but she insisted that children needed structure more than ever during times of turmoil. She suggested me specific options, such as stockpiling their favorite foods and continuing our Friday movie night ritual. We would go to the park every afternoon and read the same bedtime stories. 4 days later, I received a call from someone named David Ditt, who claimed to be Silas's new addiction counselor. They added that Silas had enrolled in an outpatient gambling addiction program and wished to discuss appropriate boundaries during his treatment. According to David, recovery is a difficult process that might take years, and most people relapse several times before obtaining stability. They appreciated that I kept my distance and claimed it was the best option for everyone involved. David confirmed that family counseling was not acceptable until Silas demonstrated persistent improvement, and I felt comfortable participating. They agreed with my decision to keep the kids apart during his initial treatment phase. David would submit monthly attendance updates, but meaningful change required time and continuous work, which Silas had only recently begun. 2 weeks later, I sat in the courtroom, watching the judge go through the stack of evidence Rose had prepared. The interim custody hearing had finally arrived, after what seemed like an eternity. Silas sat at the other table with his court-appointed attorney, his hands folded as if he were praying. The judge looked up from the financial documents containing the stolen funds and gambling records. She asked Silas directly about the $12,000, and he stuttered through an explanation about having a problem and seeking assistance. When she inquired about payday loans in my name, his lawyer objected, but she overturned it. After 40 minutes of testimony and evidence review, she granted me primary custody, with Silas receiving supervised visits every other Saturday pending further evaluation. It wasn't the entire protection I desired for the children, but at least someone would be watching him alongside them. The judge notably emphasized the financial abuse evidence that troubled her and ordered Silas to continue receiving therapy. Rose told me as we walked out of the courthouse that this would just be temporary until the full hearing in 3 months. The next morning, I met with the district attorney's office to discuss the criminal accusations. The prosecutor, a tired-looking lady with stacks of paperwork on her desk, stated that proving intent to commit wire fraud was nearly impossible because we were married at the time. She stated that courts often interpret marital assets as common property, even when one spouse conceals money from the other. However, the identity theft with payday loans was unique in that he forged my signature and utilized my social security number without permission. She would proceed with the charges, but warned me that it could take months and might simply result in probation if he had no prior record. I left feeling irritated because stealing from family was somehow less important than stealing from strangers. That weekend, Dad sat me down at the kitchen table, holding a binder of paperwork. His emergency leave was up in 3 days, and he had to return to Kuwait. He'd set up a trust account for the kids that only I could access using 2 forms of identification and a notarized signature. Silas couldn't touch it, even if he had gotten my information again. Mom would stay for another week to help with logistics and getting the kids used to their new schedule. Dad had me pledge to call him if something happened, no matter how minor. The monitored visitation center was a converted office building that had toys and cameras in every room. Silas's first visit was set for Saturday morning, and Maren had been asking about Daddy all week. When we arrived, she ran to him, but stopped short when she noticed the supervisor sitting in the corner with a clipboard. Silas attempted to be normal, but Maren kept staring at the stranger and questioning why she was there. He claimed it was only someone to help him play, but Maren wasn't fooled. She clung to him for a few minutes before pulling away, perplexed by the whole situation. When I picked her up 2 hours later, she had a total tantrum in the car. Silas's sudden interest in treatment, just when legal problems arises, makes me wonder if he's done this dance before with other people. How fortuitous that he learns the route to rehabilitation, right when the consequences arrive at his door. She sobbed because she missed Daddy and didn't understand why someone had to babysit them. I held her in the back seat while she grieved herself to exhaustion, my heart hurting for her bewilderment about why her world had changed. That night, my email inbox was flooded with messages from Silas. Long rambling walls of text that alternated between accepting responsibility and blaming me for tearing up our family. He said that his counselor encouraged him to chronicle his sentiments, but instead of keeping them secret, he sent me every thought. One paragraph would reveal that he had a problem. The next person would accuse me of overreacting. I forwarded everything to Rose without reading more than the first few lines. She advised to continue documenting everything for the permanent custody hearing. Monday presented a fresh dilemma when I discovered an eviction notice pinned to our door. The landlord had been attempting to contact us for weeks regarding late rent payments. Silas had not paid rent in October or November, and he had pocketed the money while I was preoccupied about purchasing groceries. We were 2 months behind and owed $3,600 plus late fees. I phoned the landlord right away, describing the issue while pacing the empty apartment. He agreed to a payment plan in which I could pay half now and the balance over 3 months. Dad wired the funds that afternoon, adding to my sense of humiliation and gratitude. That night, I spent hours debating whether to move in with my parents on the East Coast, or keep the kids in their school district for stability. Marin had already lost so much, and changing schools in the middle of the year seemed harsh. Her teacher explained that she was struggling with the changes at home and needed constancy. So I signed up for 3 grocery delivery apps and began driving every night after the kids went to bed. When Dad discovered out, he complained. But I needed to be independent in some way. The exhaustion was worth keeping Marin in her comfortable classroom with her classmates. Detective Vera called Wednesday with an update that made me physically ill. He had obtained CCTV footage from the casino for the dates I had specified. On October 15th, the timestamp showed Silas at a poker table during Marin's first dancing presentation. I recall being alone in that auditorium, explaining to other parents why her daddy couldn't make it. The footage from November 3rd was worse, showing him smiling with other players at her first soccer game while I cheered alone from the sidelines. Seeing him enjoying fun while I held back tears at her activities broke something within me that I had no idea could still break. The following week, David called with some disturbing news about Silas's treatment compliance. He had missed 2 group meetings, and when he did go, he downplayed his addiction and blamed external circumstances. The supervised visitation center also stated that he appeared anxious and distracted during visits, continually checking his phone and cutting them short. David claimed that his behavior indicated that he was still not totally devoted to his rehabilitation. Saturday morning during Marin's soccer practice, I was assisting her in tying her cleats when another parent grabbed my arm. She pointed across the field to where Silas was standing by the fence, watching. My protective order clearly forbade him from coming within 500 feet of the children's activities. I kept Marin distracted with stretches while nervously dialing 911. Other parents created a slight barrier between him and the field. He had already fled by the time police came 15 minutes later, but I filed another report to document the infraction. The officer stated that these reports would be used at the next hearing to demonstrate a pattern of violating court orders. 2 days later, I sat in Rose's office, filling out paperwork for a comprehensive protective order, as she explained how Silas's frequent infractions would help our case.